when you get to see the parents hold their baby for the first
Oh
time.
my God, I can't.
And you know that you are the reason that that was possible. It's incredible. And there's no words that really do it justice. And that's the moment I think that every surrogate does this for. You're thinking about that moment. And when you get there, it's even better than you imagined.
Hello, I am super excited to be chatting today with Shoshannah, who has been a surrogate 4 times and works for a surrogacy agency. So we're going to be able to get like a lot of different views on the subject and the topic, but feel free to introduce yourself.
Hi, I'm Shoshannah. I go by Sho. As you mentioned, I've been a surrogate for 4 different families, and I've been working at the program as a surrogacy coordinator, oh my goodness, for the last decade and counting. It's my whole world, and I'm really excited to be here today and get to talk to you about this.
Yay. So, I shared, you and I were chatting a little bit about kind of your journey, and you were actually, you said, the youngest surrogate to ever go through the program where you went through. So what?
Yes. Well, my
You
record did get beat at a later date, I have to admit. Somebody else beat me by a couple of months. I was so close. But at the time that I applied with the program at Hatch Egg Donation and Surrogacy, I was 21 years old, which is pretty unusual for a surrogate to be in a place in her life to do this for somebody else. Surrogates have to be in a really stable situation, before proceeding, you want to be in a really low stress situation. And I think I've basically been 40 since I was 19.
So there. Well, you also have to have had a pregnancy.
That's right. And an uncomplicated one at that. So I had my first child. I got pregnant at 19, delivered at 20. Best surprise I ever got in the world. Although the timing wasn't planned, I went my whole life knowing the one thing I wanted to be more than anything in the world was a mom. Everything else was kind of secondary. Wanted to find a career path that would allow me to do that and have time with my family. But it was always towards family. That was always the goal someday. So when it happened young, I was still thrilled to welcome that opportunity. Not going to say it was always easy, but it was really exciting.
That's amazing. And so, we talked about this. So for, I've been learning a lot about the surrogacy world. It's not anything that I've, ever really knew before the past like few months. And one thing that I've heard a lot is that agencies specifically like you to be done with your family just because there are complications and risk involved. So, at 21, were you I'm done with my family. I'm good. Like, because it feels like so young to just go, I had my first at 31. So
It's definitely young and a bit unusual. So most programs will ask a surrogate if her family's complete, and some programs will absolutely not work with a candidate unless they say yes. At the end of the day, you really can't control if their family's complete or not. You're asking that question to get informed consent to make sure that somebody is comfortable taking on those risks. You're informing them that every pregnancy has a measured risk, that if there are complications, you could need a hysterectomy or ablation, or you could have future infertility. Same goes with your own pregnancies. It's not that surrogate pregnancy is higher risk than your own pregnancy, but if your priority is still building your own family, then the timing for surrogacy probably is not right for you until you're done with that. I'd had my first. I was not ready for a second of my own yet, although we knew we would like to have more in the future. It seemed like a really good timing for our family to help somebody out in the interim. And if heaven forbid things didn't work out and we couldn't carry another of our own, we could look into other adoption or other options like adoption or fostering. So I wasn't particularly worried about it. And maybe it's a little bit of surrogate magical thinking, which a lot of surrogates have, but I think a lot of surrogates go into this thinking that nothing can ever go wrong. That's not to say that it can't. And I've certainly had my bumps in the road in my surrogacy journeys, but I'm happy to say it all worked out well. And my fertility was definitely not impacted, going on to have four surrogate babies and then another 2 of my own after my first surrogacy. Well, wow. One on the way, due in June now.
Yay. It's so interesting to, just the fact that you were 21 when you applied. So is being a surrogate something you always wanted to do, or like how did you kind of come into wanting to do this
one? So I first heard about surrogacy from the show Friends. I was probably in junior high watching the show with my best friend, and we love Friends. We watched like every episode together, and we're watching the episode where Phoebe is a surrogate for her brother. She ends up carrying triplets, which is a lot of babies. I don't necessarily recommend that. But she asked me while we're watching it, she said, if I couldn't have my own baby someday, would you do it for me? And it wasn't like even a thought in my mind. I immediately said yes. And then I started really thinking about it as a concept because I didn't really know a lot about it being in junior high. I did a little bit of research. There wasn't a lot of information out at that time about it, but it just stayed in the back of my mind. And then after I had my daughter, and she was maybe around 18 months, I started really thinking about it. And the thing that had held me back for a long time is originally when it came to surrogacy, it was just traditional surrogacy. If you go way back when you were using your own egg, you're being inseminated. And I knew that I couldn't part ways with my own biological child. That to me was just not something within me. I think it's incredible that people are donors or that they do that. It's just not for me personally. And once I learned about gestational surrogacy, doing a lot of Google research, I just thought, this is perfect. I can do exactly what I want to do. I'm not going to be bonded to the baby because it's not my baby, and I'm going to be able to help make somebody really happy. So I started researching programs, all Google, because I didn't know anybody who did it, didn't have anybody to really ask, and applied with a number of programs. Fell in love with Hatch because it really had that family feel. From the beginning, it was such a different experience. They wanted to know why I wanted to do this, what kind of family I wanted to help. It wasn't just, okay, how tall are you? How much do you weigh? What was your pregnancy like? Of course, those are all important things for surrogacy, but I felt like they really saw me as a person, not just a number, and that meant a lot to me.
Wow, that's amazing. So have you done all 4 of your journeys with Hatch?
I have, yes. And I don't think I'd ever go anywhere else. And it's funny, I get asked a lot if I would ever go independent because I have all this experience working behind the scenes. I would still never do it because I know what it's like to run the case from behind the scenes. And when I do it for my own journeys, although I do still do a lot for my case working behind the scenes, I don't have to do it by myself. I still have my team. I can't imagine flying solo on something as big as this. There's just so many nuances.
Right. So you work for Hatch now. And so when did you start working with them?
So I started working part-time almost immediately after having my first surrogate baby. I came from a very corporate background. I was working at a tech company, Ventura County, and we managed big clients like Virgin Media and DirecTV, Talk, a lot of British clients. Actually, I did the British shifts. I was overnights even, managing like 100-something employees. And I loved the company and I loved the people I worked with. But when I went back after the surrogacy, it just felt a little devoid of meaning. At the end of the day, I still love my clients. I loved everybody I was working with, but I wasn't making any real significant change in the world. So I went back to the agency owner and I said, look, if you're ever hiring, please let me know. I'd be so interested to get in this field. It fascinates me. And sure enough, they had some side work for me. So I got my start with just screening candidates, being a previous surrogate, being able to talk about the experience, and actually doing a lot on the website side of things and facilitation there because I was coming from that tech company. And it just evolved from there. So I actually stayed on for both jobs for, a little bit over a year. And then after I came back from maternity leave with my son, I went on full time, and I've never looked back. I love it. I'm not saying that's not hard work, but it never feels like work. And it has to feel that way because you're on 24/7. Pregnancy doesn't sleep.
Right. As we know. So it's amazing. I think that it says a lot about the company that, one, you went there first for your own journey and then loved it so much, you then went to work there and then carry on 3 more, surrogate babies. Is that what it's called? So that it does speak a lot to the agency itself, because it's such an intimate and personal and emotional journey from all parties, all sides involved in this.
Absolutely. It is definitely an emotionally charged journey. And I mean, the support that I received was just immense. And it was really, while it was interesting juggling both hats, being both a surrogate at the company and working at the same time on the cases, actually, I think it's really been a strength and an asset because I can really connect with our surrogates and our intended parents. I get asked a lot of questions about the firsthand experience, and it's nice to be able to speak from that place of experience about, all of it, the good, the bad, the ugly, because again, it's not always smooth sailing. Surrogacy can have its challenges. I've had my long journeys and my bumps in the road, but when you get to the end goal, it's always so worth it.
Yeah. So for people who are interested in being a surrogate, like what are a few pieces of advice that you would give to them?
Oh, that's a good one. I think a big part is timing, and I think that's true of maybe any pregnancy, but in surrogacy, even more so. You have to be at a really good place in your life to do this, where you can be really committed to the process. I think you have to be pretty resilient and flexible to be a surrogate, because things can get thrown your way you're not expecting. Transfer dates get moved or canceled. Pregnancy complications, even minor ones, can come up that slow you down or require you to bed rest for a little bit. So you have to have that flexibility in your life to make this a priority. And I think one of the hardest times is there are times where you have to even sometimes prioritize it a little bit ahead of your own family. You might miss out on a birthday party if you have to bed rest or something comes up. And so, having those conversations with your partner or your best support person or your kids, making sure it really is a family process, everybody's on the same page as a team. It's so important to navigate this in a positive way. Communication is a big thing in this. So I talk to surrogates about this a lot, and having that perspective that as the surrogate, you're sort of steering the ship in a lot of ways, right? I mean, what you eat, what you do, making to appointments on time, giving those updates, you're being relied on for a lot of different things in this process. And you have to keep that perspective, even when you're feeling hormonal or tired or grumpy, that this is somebody else's pregnancy too, and you're sharing that experience with them and you want it to be positive. Right. So being empathetic to all the things that parents go through and how you share that information. I try to be mindful. I get so green in all my pregnancies. I try to be really mindful not to complain about that to my intended parents unless they're specifically asking me those questions, because I know this intended mom would give anything to be experiencing that, even if it was miserable. I know these parents have been through so much to get here. I know they've often been through years of trying and losses and more money than I can even probably fathom, before they turn to surrogacy, trying to make it happen some other way. So empathy is a really important quality for surrogates. And then the other advice I would give is really feel good about your program when you get started. I wouldn't advise anyone really to go independently. That's my personal take. I do know people who've gone independent and have had some positive experiences. It's not that it's impossible, but especially as a first-time surrogate, there are so many nuances you just don't even have any idea exist. And it means that you're in direct contact with the parents for things like the finances, if complications come up. There's no buffer, and that can really impact your relationship. An agency is a wonderful buffer to keep that relationship really positive and worry about all those little nuances while you can focus on sharing that relationship and the joy of the pregnancy. So researching your program, feeling good about where you go. Agencies, they're not one size fits all. So while I'd love to say that Hatch is the program for everybody, it may not be. If a surrogate really wants a very hands-off experience, wants to be more independent, we're a very high-touch program. We're really in touch and making sure everybody has what they need. And we have, our support meetings. So we're very hands-on. We're very much about that relationship and that care. And there are some surrogates that would prefer to fly more solo. So if you have to kind of feel it out and make sure it's a good fit for you wherever you go, there's no real right or wrong. It's just about your comfort level and making sure that they're following best practices, which a first-time surrogate may not know what those are. But even simple things like making sure you have your own attorney to represent you on the contract who's experienced in surrogacy, making sure that the funds for the surrogacy are held in third-party escrow, working with the Reputable Clinic. I know our agency works a lot with Pacific Fertility Center of Los Angeles, PFCLA, and they're a wonderful clinic. I actually did my first surrogacy through them before I worked in this field, and so they're very close to my heart. But there are a lot of great clinics out there. That just is one of them, and we work with a number, but PFCLA is pretty fantastic.
Yeah, no, there's so many pieces involved in a surrogacy journey and so many different people and touch points. And, it's, I was talking to a woman who was a surrogate yesterday, and she said that when she got her first contract back, it was like 63 pages of just like everything that you could think of, from like, these are the things that you can do, these are the things you can't do, these are the things you can't eat, these are like, that again, if you wouldn't have no idea. And she unfortunately didn't have an attorney that was very well versed in surrogacy, so she kind of had to figure a lot of stuff out on her own. And so that's part of what Connecting Rainbows does, is really getting the expert attorneys who really do specialize in family building, making sure that the intended parents have an attorney that specializes in that, as well as the surrogate. You each need your own representation, so there's no conflicts.
So important. Yeah, to prevent conflict of interest is a big part. And you're right, it's a niche area of the law. It's so different from other attorneys. I think people think attorney, they think somebody who's going to like fight for you tooth and nail, but you really need a surrogacy attorney who sees the relationship and preserving that. You don't
Yeah.
want to knock down, drag out fight in a surrogacy. If there is a bump that comes up, you want to make sure everyone can kind of get together as a team and find the best solution that works in everybody's best interest and get through it together. So having an attorney who sees that bigger picture of, okay, someone may be asking for this person wants something different. How do we find that middle ground so that this match stays together and they have a wonderful experience together? It's a very different dynamic. And I love that you bring up reading the contract for the first time, because it is like reading a dystopian science fiction novel the first time you read one of those contracts. It's really bizarre to see things in print, like what you can and cannot eat, where you can and cannot go, not being able to travel outside of the country, not going to Zika areas, obviously not drinking or smoking, but even things like not eating high mercury fish. There are things that some of them are really common sense in pregnancy, and some of them are specific to the case. Even parents who want you to eat organic. Reading about tough things like termination and reduction in black and white print, that can be a little bit hard to swallow the first time, even though it's something that's talked about a lot in the screening process. It's really different looking at it right in front of you on paper in legalese. So it definitely is a bit of a learning curve to go through those contracts. Now they're kind of second nature to me. But the first time I read one, it was pretty intimidating, especially at 21 years old, reading through this contract.
Oh my gosh, I bet. You're like, what
gosh,
did I just get into?
Binding. It talks about things like breach of contract. And you go, oh my gosh, I don't ever want to breach my contract. That's a terrifying thought. Like, what would happen? But the contracts are really there. And this is having a great attorney talk me through it, helped me to understand it really well. They're there to protect everybody. A good contract protects the surrogate and the parents very equally, to make sure that everybody gets through this process as smoothly and safely as possible. And an attorney can be a real big help even throughout the journey, because they're going to help with the parentage process, which is another really important component. Obviously, you want that to go as smoothly as possible, so there's no confusion there as far as legal guardianship at the end. And it's a complex part of the process. The legal side is definitely unique compared with any other legal field.
Totally. Yeah, for sure.
And I
so
think
if you
really quickly, sorry, connecting rainbows, I think what's so special about what you do too, I think there's a very special niche to working with the LGBTQ plus families, because not every law office, not every doctor's office, not every agency is going to be friendly for those families. So it's so important to have specific resources that know that those programs not only are open, but are experienced in that.
Yeah. The experience is big, just because, especially in terms of the legal stuff, the laws are different, and you need to make sure that you're well equipped. And then, when it comes to the clinics and the agencies, that you're going to use the right language and the right pronouns and terminology. And you're not going to, ask where the husband is when, it's a lesbian couple, or if it's a single mom by choice, or, gay men, you're not going to be like, oh, where's the what? It's just, there's just like, it takes a special people with, just using appropriate and inclusive language, just to work with the community. So I'm grateful for the work that you do.
You too.
Oh, well, thank you. What do you wish that you would have known before you started your journeys?
Gosh, what do I wish I would have known? That's a tough one. I think the thing I probably wish I would have known the most is to not be as sensitive on certain things. And this is more dealing with in pregnancy, and especially, dealing with pregnancy during a pandemic is a different experience. And I find that it's sometimes challenging to put your own feelings aside in a surrogacy, and to not take, sometimes parents, they've never been through pregnancy. They don't know what to expect. They might ask sometimes questions that make you feel a little uncomfortable, or like maybe feel a little judgmental, and that's really not the intention. So I think being able to keep that mental separation, it's easier now in my 30s than it was in my 20s, and think this way that they're feeling right now is not about me. It's about their anxiety. It's about what they've been through. It's about their journey, and that they don't understand some of these things the way I understand them, because they haven't been through pregnancy before. And really, I think I did a good job on the outside, but there's definitely times where I feel like my feelings got hurt in the process, and maybe shouldn't have been in hindsight, but hormones can be mean.
I was just going to say, you're hormonal, and you can't blame yourself for feeling the way, you're feeling. Feelings are valid, but I think it's good to have that perspective of, at least going in knowing that there should be some separation. Obviously, you can't help how you feel, but you can help how you react to it.
Exactly. And also, I think I could have been better, especially 20 versus 30, expressing those feelings for the most part, I kept anything I ever felt to myself. I wasn't somebody who ever, I'm not a complainer, I might talk to like my team and my support system, but there are times, where I needed to kind of have that separation. Even in the postpartum, I think it's important to, you kind of get back to your family life and kind of shift your focus. I pumped after all of my surrogacies. Not every surrogate does pump, but it's something that I did. And it's a wonderful thing to do, but it definitely is a commitment of time and energy. In many ways, I'd say it's actually harder than the pregnancy. Pregnancy, if you can sleep well at night, you can go to sleep and nothing's going to wake you. But pumping, you're waking up like every 2 to 3 hours to pump. So that part has its challenges too. So I think there are times in the surrogacy where I could have done a better job setting boundaries for myself and, and making sure I juggled family and surrogacy a little bit better. It can be hard, and I am definitely a people pleaser. So I was very pro my IPs, and not a bad thing to be. I mean, I know they really appreciated everything that was being done, but I think it is a balance, and you find that balance. I think I found it better in subsequent journeys and as I grew and as I learned. And also, I think just being your own advocate, it is important in this process. You have an agency, hopefully, who advocates well for you too, but they don't know how you're feeling unless you tell them. So, I think I get surrogates who, bless them, I mean, they could be sick as a dog. Like these poor girls, sometimes if they get really bad morning sickness, they're dying and they feel awful, but they won't tell us that. They'll be like, no, I'm fine, everything's great. And then you see them on the support meeting Zoom and they're like white as a ghost. Oh. And I think it's important to share how you're feeling, maybe not always with the parents, because you don't want to cause worry over common pregnancy complaints, but with the program, especially, the program's there to support you. They are your network, they're your people. So if you're not feeling good, they want to like send you Preggy Pops or C-bands, or whatever they can do to try to help you feel better. They want to have you have the conversation with your doctor. They don't care if I get a text at like 2 o'clock in the morning if somebody's having spotting or cramping. I don't want them to wait till the next morning and feel like an inconvenience. When a surrogate goes through this process, that team is there to support you. So utilize the support that you have around you, I think, is another really big thing I wish I'd learned earlier on. I tend to be very independent myself and to want to solve all my own problems. Can be very beneficial sometimes, but it also, means that you miss out on support that could be really helpful and reduce some of the stress.
Yeah. No, that's an amazing tip. I think that for me, and one of the biggest concerns I would have is that attachment to the baby.
Everybody wants to know if you miss the baby. I get this a lot. Or how could you give a baby up? It's so different from your own pregnancies. And when you go into the first time, you don't necessarily know that. You go into it thinking like, okay, it's not my biological child. I'm doing this for somebody else. And you go about the process differently. I think there's an added layer of caution in a surrogacy. Not that you're not careful with your own, but you're answering to somebody else in this too. So you're super careful. And the things that you do are different. So for example, I talk to my babies, talk to all my babies in the womb, play the music, I do all of that. With my surrogacies, I still do that, but I play like music the parents love, or I play recordings of their voice. And when I talk to them, I tell them about all the things their parents are doing to get ready. They're decorating the nursery, This is the theme, and these are their names, and here's where you're gonna be growing up. I tell them their story, even if they can't necessarily understand it all through, being in the womb and in water and whatnot. I think the power of intention goes a long way in this process. And I think it's as good for me as it is for them to hear that, because it sets that mindset up. And I think mindset's a big part of this. Yeah. When I did finally give birth to my first surrogate baby, I remember being actually really surprised at how little I felt. And I don't mean that to sound heartless. It's not that I don't absolutely love that baby. I think they're incredible. That baby is going to be 11 this year, by the way, which is wild. Wow. Goes so fast, but it's so different from your own. With my own babies, there's that immediate connection, and they were mine, and I could have picked them out of 100 babies in a room. When I met them on the outside for the first time, I remember just thinking, well, you're adorable, but it was like holding a niece or a nephew or a friend's baby. There wasn't that connection there. I couldn't have picked them out. They were still very foreign to me, even though I carried them for 9 months. And then I had this moment of true fear when the mom let me hold the baby. She'd already had her bonding time, and so I'm holding baby. And I'm going to hand him back, and I think, oh my gosh, what if he cries? What if he cries when I hand it back? He's been hearing my voice for all these months. The mom will be devastated. And I was so kind of panicked in that moment. So I very slowly handed him back. He didn't care one bit. He was, this is the person with the food. This is the person who's been caring for me since I came out. We're good here. So it was never an issue. It's amazing. I really do believe strongly, it's not scientific, but in that power of intention and what that does, and being the person who helps to bridge that gap for bonding. So never felt bonded to my surrogate babies. Even in subsequent cases, I connect with the parents. I definitely feel that connection with them. And I'm still in touch with them, which is really special. Not every surrogate has that ongoing friendship, but I've made really great friendships with my families. So I've carried in total for a single mom from Louisiana who met somebody when we were going through the process together. And he was there for the birth, and I actually went to their wedding 10 months later, which was pretty special.
Sweet.
So that was really exciting. My second journey was with a gay couple from West Virginia, and they had one child through our program already. Actually, their surrogate was the first surrogate I ever screened when I started working here. Unfortunately, she couldn't do it for them the second time, so I carried the sibling, and that was pretty cool. And then my third family was from Australia, a traditional couple who tried for many years on their own. So I carried their first baby. And then my last family was the second time with our program as well. And that helped match them the first time around. I'm good friends with their first surrogate, but you couldn't care for them a second time. So I carried a sibling for them in their Florida area. So I've had a little bit of everything in my journeys. Couldn't pick a favorite if I tried.
Wow, that's amazing. Okay, you shared kind of your experience with the bonding. Have you found that other surrogates at least in your agency have had trouble with that attachment?
Not really. The only case I had one case many years ago. It was a twin case, and I recall that neither the surrogate or the parents had really strong boundaries with each other. They were so loving, and they had a wonderful relationship, but maybe it was so connective that it was harder to kind of separate after the birth. And in that case, it was a case where I believe the surrogate did breastfeed the baby in the hospital. Some parents do ask for that. That's pretty rare. Most people pump. And we really strongly recommend pumping over nursing, because for most people, nursing it's a bonding experience.
Yeah.
And but then, speaking from experience, I actually did nurse one of my surrogate babies upon request of the parents. Actually, two of them. One only one time, but one in the hospital for the entire stay, because they were so set baby was not going to get any formula, and I was totally on board for that. But we worked it out in a very unique way. So, and the mom and I were very close. She would sit on the bed with me. She would hold baby often while I was feeding baby, and we kind of did it as a team. And then I was helping her to learn how to use the SNS. So we still made it very much about the mom and the bonding. And that's a very unique way of going about things. I certainly would never recommend that to like a first-time surrogate. But I was a little bit of a unique case, because I've, had donor milk with my own child. I've had reduction surgery. I've had other women help me, and I've helped other women when I could donate as well. So, and other families, not just women. But it's been, for me, it was really meaningful to be able to do that for my surrogate babies and to help in that way. And I didn't see it as anything more really than nutrition. I was happy to do it, and also happy to really help the mom have that experience too.
Yeah. That's crazy. It's so interesting, just as somebody who's never been through it, or really has had a desire to.
I don't see a lot of surrogates. I mean, again, that's really the only case I saw. And they still, in the end, it went really well. We were there to support her. She had some counseling. The contracts do generally include counseling for all surrogates, because things can come up that you can't predict. I lost a twin in one of my surrogacies. That was really hard. I wasn't equipped for how I was going to feel after the delivery. I think I was very strong during the pregnancy and very like, we're just going to hold this together. We're going to be calm for surviving baby and get through this. And after baby was out, it hit me like a ton of bricks, and it was really tough for a while. Having all the experience in the world doesn't protect your feelings from the things that can come up in this journey. It's still hard sometimes. But for the most part, I hear surrogates say that they bond to the family. You get connection to the family. Of course, you love seeing updates of your surrogate baby, but they're not your own. You don't go to bed worrying about them at night. I think about that all the time, where you could go a month and not necessarily think strongly about any kind of one of them, and then something will come up, it'll remind you, and you'll think and you'll check in, but it's not a part of your daily life. You go back to your own life and your own family, and you know that somebody's worrying about them. You don't have to.
Right. So incredible. It's so incredible. Well, I think those are like the big questions I have, just for people that are kind of interested in surrogacy, or, carrying, for a family. I think it's just so special. Like, the most incredible, generous gift that you can give someone, outside of like an organ, just like, to give them a family. And it's just, it's amazing and incredible. And, the fact that you did it 4 times is,
I still kind of marvel at the 4 times, just because it feels like it's happened in a short period of time in my life that we did all of that. So it's kind of like a distant memory in a way now. The one thing I think I would leave anybody with is if they have it in their heart to do this, it's a tremendous thing to do for somebody else. And everybody talks about how rewarding it is for, the parents, they're going to have a baby. It's so wonderful for them. But I feel like I got just as much out of this as my families did in the end. It's so emotionally rewarding. When you get to see, I always get emotional, when you get to see the parents hold their baby for the first
Oh
time,
my God, I can't.
and you know that you are the reason that was possible, there is nothing. I mean, the closest comparison I can get is holding your own baby for the first time, but it's different. It's incredible. And there's no words that really do it justice. And that's the moment I think that every surrogate does this for. That's what that every time they're doing a shot, every time they're nauseous, they're driving to appointments all over the place, you're thinking about that moment. And when you get there, it's even better than you imagined.
I would lose it. Like I get like,
Oh,
I was like getting emotional
There's
just
been a lot
thinking
of
about
happy
like,
tears in this process.
yeah, it's amazing. Well, Sho, thank you so much, for sharing, and, people can check out Hatch, and yeah. And you guys where are you located?
So we're based out of Encino. Our team works remotely for the most part, and we have support for everybody everywhere. We have surrogates all throughout the US in surrogacy-friendly states, and families come to us from all over the world.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much again.
My pleasure. It's so nice getting to talk to you today, Jenna. I hope you have a fantastic week.
Thank you, and feel good.
Thank you. You take care. Bye.